Think your life is hard? Try going just one day without your phone, hot water, or toilet paper, and now imagine doing that while chewing moldy bread, drinking beer for breakfast, and praying your soup doesn't contain actual bugs. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where suffering wasn't a glitch in the system. It was the system. Forget the fairy tales. Medieval life wasn't all noble knights and damsels and candlelit towers. It was back-breaking labor, deadly diseases, and a justice system that basically flipped a coin to decide your fate. Spoiler alert, the coin was rigged. In this video we're diving deep into mud, misery, and medieval madness to show you exactly why your ancestors were tougher than you, and why you should thank the universe you were born after the invention of soap. Brace yourself for a tour through the worst food you've never eaten, the most disgusting bathrooms ever imagined, and punishments so twisted they make horror movies look like bedtime stories. So grab a snack, preferably one without worms, and hit that subscribe button now. Because once we're done here you'll never look at a history book, or your own plumbing, the same way again. You ever complained about your lunch being bland? In medieval times food wasn't just boring, it was a biohazard. Forget turkey legs and golden goblets. That's Hollywood. The real medieval meal plan? A culinary crime scene. Let's start with pottage. Sounds fancy, right? It wasn't. It was a sad, bubbling pot of mush, mostly water, turnips, and regret. If you were lucky it had a few peas. If you were unlucky it had bugs, dirt, and maybe a rat tail that fell in last week. Pottage was cooked and recooked for days, because nothing says bon appetit like spoiled soup on low heat. Then there's bread, the lifeblood of the peasant diet. Except this bread wasn't soft, fresh, or remotely pleasant. It was dark, dense, and filled with something extra, rock dust. That's right. The stone mills they used to grind flour shed grit right into the mix. Medieval teeth weren't strong by design. They were forged by daily chewing on gravel biscuits. But wait, it gets worse. If you were eating rye bread you risked ergot poisoning, a fungus that caused burning skin, seizures, hallucinations, and death. Entire villages sometimes got poisoned at once. People thought it was witchcraft. Spoiler, it was just your town baker failing hygiene 101. Me? That was a luxury. If you did get some, odds are it was on the edge of rotten, because there were no refrigerators, only hope. To mask the taste of decay they used heavy spices, if they could afford them. If not, just shut your nose and chew fast. But here's the kicker, you couldn't even drink the water. Most water sources were so contaminated with human waste, garbage, and dead animals that drinking from them was a straight shot to the grave. So what did people drink? Oh, weak beer. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even children drank it, sometimes up to 8 pints a day. Imagine being 5 years old and knocking back pints, not because you're a delinquent but because the water is trying to kill you. And let's not forget the fish. Preserved by drying or salting until it was about as chewy as old leather. If you lived inland, that fish might have traveled for weeks in the sun before hitting your plate. By the time you ate it, the only thing fresh about it was the smell, freshly awful. So the next time your food delivery's late or your soup's a little cold, just remember, your medieval ancestors were out there eating fungus toast and praying their stew didn't scream back. So, let's talk about going to the bathroom. Modern humans don't realize what a miracle it is to have a clean toilet, flushing water, scented soap, and privacy. In medieval times, none of that existed. The concept of sanitation was a cruel joke, and you were the punchline. Let's start with the chamber pot, the medieval version of a toilet. It was just a bucket or a bowl you kept under your bed. Yep, under the bed. After doing your business you had 2 options. Empty it yourself or wait for someone else to deal with it. And where did that waste go? Out the window. Literally. People would open their second-story windows and dump it into the street below. To give warning, they'd shout "Garde à l'eau," which loosely translates to "look out for the water." But it wasn't water. Not even close. This was the medieval splash zone, and if you were walking beneath it, you'd better pray. In towns it got even worse. Waste flowed in open trenches down the middle of the road. That's not poetic imagery, that's raw sewage running through every neighborhood. If you tripped in the street you might not want to get up. If you were lucky enough to live in a castle you got to use a garderobe, basically a stone seat built into the wall with a hole. Your waste dropped straight down the side of the castle. In Dover Castle, one garderobe had a 70-foot drop. Royal plumbing was just vertical defecation. But the worst of the worst? The heroes of horror, gong farmers. These brave, or desperate, souls were paid to empty cesspits and transport human waste outside the city. They worked only at night because the smell was so bad they weren't allowed in public during the day. Imagine a job so disgusting, Your coworkers don't want to see you even at lunch. Despite the stench, Gong farmers made good money. About 4 times what a regular laborer earned. But it came with a cost: zero social life, chronic illness, and a permanent smell that no herb pouch could hide. Toilet paper? Please. If you were rich, you used wool or hemp. If you were poor, which was most people, you used leaves, moss, hay, or your bare hand. That's right. And remember, they didn't wash hands after. Because, well, they didn't wash. Bathing was rare, soap was luxury, and the result? The average medieval person walked around smeared with days, sometimes weeks, of their own filth. Even the Romans, centuries earlier, had better hygiene systems. The knowledge of things like sponges on sticks in public baths? Mostly lost to time. So, next time you sit on a clean toilet seat and scroll your phone in peace, take a moment. Light a candle. Thank your plumbing. Because in the Middle Ages, relieving yourself meant hoping gravity and your neighbors were on your side. Tired after a long day at work? Try waking up at dawn, working until nightfall, getting paid in bread, and collapsing on a pile of straw, only to do it all again, until you die. That was the daily life of a medieval peasant. Not glamorous. Not heroic. Just brutally necessary. Most people in the Middle Ages were serfs or peasants, tied to land they didn't own and couldn't leave. The land belonged to a noble or the church, and your job was to work it, forever. You were born into your status and you died in it. So, what did a typical day look like? Start at sunrise. No alarms, just the rooster and the crushing weight of survival. Grab your tools, usually wooden, worn, and wildly inefficient, and start farming. You'd plow the fields using oxen, scatter seeds by hand, and harvest crops with basic sickles. During planting and harvest season, peasants worked 16-hour days under the blazing sun, often barefoot, with nothing but pottage waiting at home. And guess what? They didn't even get to keep all that food. A chunk went to the Lord, another to the church, and whatever crumbs were left. That was dinner. According to historical records, a medieval farm worker could burn over 4,000 calories a day, just from manual labor. Gym memberships weren't needed. The medieval workout plan was called, "Don't Die." If you weren't a farmer, maybe you became a craftsman. Sounds better, right? Not really. Blacksmiths worked in smoke-filled forges, breathing in toxic fumes and risking burns with every swing. Tanners, who made leather, used urine and lime to cure animal hides. Chemicals so harsh they turned your skin yellow and your social life non-existent. And you didn't just walk into these jobs. No, sir. To become a skilled tradesman, you started as an apprentice, usually around age 7. You'd leave your family and live with a master craftsman, working 6 to 7 days a week with no pay for up to 14 years. Maybe you'd become a journeyman. But most died long before that. Other medieval jobs were somehow even worse. Link boys were children who carried torches to light the way for the rich at night, basically walking fire hazards. Pure finders collected dog feces to sell to tanners. That was their job, picking up poop for pennies. And the money? Laughable. A day laborer might earn 1 or 2 pennies per day, just enough to buy 2 loaves of that delightful rock-filled bread we mentioned earlier. No benefits. No holidays. No unions. Just a system designed to keep you exhausted, underfed, and 1 injury away from starving. So next time you're stuck in traffic or complaining about Zoom fatigue, just imagine hoeing frozen fields at sunrise, eating moldy soup, and getting paid with a good job, serf. In medieval times, burnout wasn't a diagnosis, it was the end. Feeling sick in the Middle Ages? Congrats, you were probably about to die. But don't worry, they'd treat you first. Forget everything you know about modern medicine. No antibiotics. No antiseptics. No understanding of germs. If you so much as sneezed in the Middle Ages, someone might try to cut you open, or bleed you dry. The dominant theory of the time was the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Doctors believed your health depended on keeping these humors balanced. Got a fever? Too much blood. Obvious solution, bloodletting. And by bloodletting we don't mean a little prick. We mean slicing open a vein and draining it into a bowl while you lie there wondering if the fever was actually the better option. If that didn't work, they'd slap on some leeches, because clearly the cure for being weak was losing more blood. Some medical texts even recommended using 70 leeches at once. That's not a typo. 70. Imagine walking into a clinic and coming out looking like a horror movie prop. If you didn't die from blood loss, there were still mercury treatments to look forward to. That's right, liquid metal. Mercury was used to treat everything from skin conditions to syphilis. And sure, it would kill bacteria, and your brain, your liver, and eventually you. Oh, and painkillers? Not a thing. Surgery was done while you were wide awake, often held down by friends or family. Anesthesia was just a stick to bite and a priest whispering last rites in case things went south, which, spoiler alert, they usually did. The real kicker? Many of these treatments actually made things worse. Infections were rampant because no one knew about sterilization. Doctors didn't wash hands. They didn't even wash their tools. They'd go from one open wound to another with the same filthy knife and think, job well done. Even if you avoided doctors, diseases were everywhere. The common cold could kill you. The flu? Death sentence. And if you were really unlucky? The Black Death, which wiped out half of Europe in just a few years. Child mortality was heartbreaking. About 30% of children died before age 5. The average person, if they made it through childhood, could expect to live to about 35 or 40. Not because the human body couldn't go longer, but because medieval life was just that brutal. And don't even ask about dental care. There were no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no floss. Toothaches turned into infections. Infections turned into death. Medieval dentists were often just barbers with pliers, and they didn't believe in numbing anything. Even the rare medicine that did work was often drowned in superstition. Illness was blamed on bad air, evil spirits, or the position of the moon. Remedies might include chanting, blood from a black cat, or a pigeon carcass strapped to your foot. And hygiene? A total afterthought. People thought bathing opened your pores and let disease in. So they avoided it. Instead of washing hands, they wiped them on their already filthy clothes because apparently spreading disease was a group effort. So yeah, if you had a sniffle in medieval times, you didn't get a prescription. You got a knife, a leech, and a prayer. If you ever feel like the modern legal system is broken, just be glad you weren't alive in medieval times, because that justice system didn't just fail, it straight up bullied people to death. Let's start with the basics. There were no standardized legal codes. What was legal in one village might get you hanged in the next. You could commit a crime just by being in the wrong place or offending the wrong person. Your Miranda rights? Try this instead. You have the right to be punished. You have the right to confess under torture. You have the right to pray someone feels sorry for you, which they won't. Even minor offenses were treated like high treason. Stealing a loaf of bread? You might lose a hand. Cutting down a tree in the king's forest? Death penalty. Owe someone more than 12 pence? Guess what? Also death. But here's where it goes from cruel to cartoonishly absurd. Trial by ordeal. Let's say someone accused you of a crime. You didn't get a lawyer. You got fire, water, or worse. Trial by fire. You had to carry a red-hot iron bar 9 feet. Then they'd wrap your hand and check it in 3 days. If it healed, cleanly? Innocent. Infected? Guilty. Fun fact, nearly every wound got infected. So, yeah. Trial by water. You were tied up and thrown into a river. If you sank and drowned, you were innocent. If you floated, God clearly rejected your sinful body, so you were guilty and executed. Lose-lose. Justice wasn't blind, it was blindfolded, spinning in circles, swinging an axe at whoever made eye contact. And if you were found guilty? Buckle up. Execution was public entertainment. Hanging was the light punishment. For bigger sins, they used drawing and quartering, being dragged through the streets, hanged until nearly dead, disemboweled while still alive, then beheaded and finally chopped into 4 pieces. It was a punishment and a community event. People brought snacks. Meanwhile, nobles had a different rulebook. If a noble was accused, they could demand trial by combat. That's right, dueling it out. And if you had money, you could just hire a stronger fighter. Justice for sale. Literally. Can't pay? Too poor to fight? Then your next stop was likely a dungeon. Not a prison like today, but a dark, disease-ridden hole in the ground. You were chained to walls. You got no food unless your family brought it. And you didn't stay there for time served. You stayed until they tortured a confession out of you. Speaking of torture, yeah, that was just another step in the legal process. Devices included the rack, which stretched your body until your joints dislocated. Thumbscrews, which crushed fingers. The Iron Maiden, a coffin full of spikes. And the heretic's fork, a metal rod placed between your chin and chest to prevent you from nodding or sleeping. Oh, and you could be publicly humiliated even for petty stuff. Locked in stocks while people threw rotten food and insults. Women accused of gossip or nagging? They got the ducking stool, strapped to a chair and dunked in a river until they shut up, or drowned. Law enforcement? A joke. There were no real police. Just night watchmen, usually elderly men hired to walk around shouting, "All is well," while everything burned behind them. And if someone yelled, "Stop thief," the best hope was that a bystander stuck out a leg and tripped the guy. That was the criminal justice system. So no, medieval justice wasn't about truth. It was about spectacle, fear, and keeping people in their place. And if you were ever accused, the odds of walking away free were slim. The odds of walking at all after torture? Even slimmer. Forget every epic scene you've watched of knights charging across sunlit fields, swords raised, banners flying. Real medieval warfare wasn't heroic. It was hell on earth, and for most people, it was less about fighting and more about surviving the aftermath. First, understand this: war was constant. If you lived in medieval Europe, odds are you'd see multiple wars in your lifetime. The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years. Local lords waged private battles. Crusades dragged on for decades. Peace was a vacation. War was the lifestyle. So what did you wear to this party? Only the richest knights could afford full-plate armor, costing the equivalent of a modern luxury car. That suit of steel represented 2 to 3 years' wages for a skilled craftsman. Everyone else? Padded cloth, maybe with some metal scraps sewn in if they were lucky. Peasants turned soldiers often fought with axes, spears, or even farming tools. You know, whatever was lying around that could stab a guy. And swords? Those were for the nobility. Most of the army fought with tools meant for grain, not gore. Now let's talk weapons of mass despair. The longbow was the medieval sniper rifle. English bowmen trained from childhood, pulling 200-pound bows thousands of times. The result? Twisted spines, permanent back damage, and deformed arms, just so they could launch arrows that pierced armor from 200 yards away. And if you were hit? Good luck. Because here's the thing: medicine couldn't save you. Battle wounds rarely killed instantly. Instead, they festered. Without antiseptics or antibiotics, even minor cuts turned deadly. You didn't just risk dying in battle, you risked rotting to death afterward. But for peasants, the worst part of war wasn't even the fighting. It was the armies themselves. Medieval armies lived off the land, which is code for looting, stealing, and burning everything in sight. Your fields? Burned. Your livestock? Slaughtered. Your home? Gone. Soldiers didn't bring food. They took it from you, and then moved on. And sieges? Oh, you thought battles were bad? Sieges were medieval torture in slow motion. A castle or city would be surrounded for months, even years, cut off from food and supplies. People trapped inside starved to death. Then they ate rats, then cats, then each other. During the Siege of Paris, 885 to 886, cannibalism became common. The longest siege in recorded history, Candia, 21 years. That's not a typo. 21 years of slow starvation and despair. And disease? War's best friend. Thousands of men packed together with no sanitation, little food, and contaminated water. Perfect conditions for plague, dysentery, and typhoid. During the Crusades, half the men in some armies died from disease before seeing a single battle. So what happened to civilians caught in war zones? Horrors. Rape, murder, starvation. Villages slaughtered indiscriminately. Women and children not spared, sometimes targeted. Running meant leaving everything behind. Staying meant risking your life. There were no good choices, just slightly slower paths to suffering. And if you survived the war? Congratulations, you still lived in the Middle Ages. So next time you watch a knight ride gallantly into battle in full armor with a flowing cape, remember, that armor cost more than your village. That cape was probably soaked in blood. And that knight? He wasn't saving anyone, he was there to conquer, collect taxes, and maybe burn your fields on the way out. If you think your apartment smells weird after you forget to take out the trash, congratulations, you're living in luxury. Because in medieval towns, the smell hit you before the view did, and the view wasn't great either. Let's start with the air. A delightful cocktail of rotting food, animal guts, human waste, unwashed bodies, and smoke from 1,000 open fires. That was your daily atmosphere. Forget Febreze. People carried small pouches of herbs called pomanders just to avoid throwing up when they stepped outside. The streets? Literal trash canals. There was no garbage collection. Butchers dumped entrails and blood right outside their stalls. People flung chamber pot waste into the gutters. Dead animals rotted where they dropped. Mud mixed with manure. Every step was a gamble. Now imagine all this, with zero personal hygiene. Most people bathed only a few times a year. Not because they were lazy, but because they believed that bathing opened your pores and made you more vulnerable to disease. In winter, some went 4 to 5 months without washing. You smelled. Everyone smelled. Nobody cared. Or maybe they just couldn't smell it anymore. And don't even mention head lice. They were normal. People had combs specifically for lice, like we have hairbrushes. If someone had only moderate lice, that was considered hygienic. The real flex was not being completely infested. Clothing? Undergarments were made of rough linen that chafed your skin raw. Outer garments were heavy wool, worn for months without washing. You owned maybe 2 or 3 outfits total. You wore them until they literally fell apart, and then you patched them up with more scratchy fabric. And don't forget the shoes. Thin leather flats with no soles, no arch support, and no protection. Walking through a medieval street meant stepping in mud, feces, urine, blood, bones, garbage, and feeling every single inch of it. Now, how about privacy? Didn't exist. Most families lived in a single room. You cooked, worked, ate, and slept all in the same space. Everyone shared beds, including strangers at inns. Servants stayed in the room. Sex, childbirth, death, all happened with an audience. Even language was a barrier. What sounds like English today was called Middle English then, and it might as well have been a different language. What is your name? Became Wyatus Thin Nama? You wouldn't understand them. They wouldn't understand you. You'd sound like you had a head injury to them, and they'd treat you like it. So let's recap. You reek. You're itchy. You live in a lice-infested one-room shack with no clean water, no privacy, and streets full of liquid death. Your shoes are a suggestion, not protection. Your neighbors throw their poop out the window. But hey, you survived another day. Barely. In a world with no Google, no libraries for peasants, and no science classes, fear filled the vacuum left by knowledge. The medieval mindset was shaped less by facts and more by superstition, rumor, and pure imagination, with deadly consequences. Got a fever? Must be caused by bad air, a curse, or alignment of the planets. Saw a crow on your roof? Probably an omen that someone's about to die. A weird cloud? Demon. Solar eclipse? The end of the world. Basically, every Tuesday felt like the apocalypse. Witches, demons, and evil spirits were very real to medieval people, and they were blamed for everything from miscarriages to crop failures. Your neighbor's cow died? Must have been cursed. Your baby cried too much? A changeling. Your bread went moldy? Witchcraft. Burn her. And let's be clear, this wasn't harmless folklore. These beliefs led to torture, trials, and executions. Entire communities could turn on someone based on a sneeze at the wrong time. And remember ergot poisoning from bad rye bread? That caused hallucinations, and possibly sparked witch hunt hysteria when whole towns started seeing things that weren't there. The medical system wasn't just broken, it was possessed by bad ideas. People genuinely believed sickness was a punishment from God. The cure was usually prayer, flagellation, or bloodletting. And if that didn't work? Well, must have been the devil. If you were left-handed, had a birthmark, or were just a little different, you were at risk. The phrase, "the devil is in you," was taken literally. And when fear took hold, it was brutal, swift, and irreversible. But it wasn't just belief systems that trapped people, it was their place in the world. The feudal system locked everyone into rigid social roles. You weren't just born into a class, you were nailed to it. Peasants worked the land. Nobles ruled it. The church judged both. Social mobility was almost non-existent. If you wanted to rise above your station, you'd have better luck praying for a miracle, and even that required church approval. Education? For the elite. Most peasants were illiterate, and books were hand-copied, chained to monastery shelves and written in Latin. So how did people learn things? Through storytelling, gossip, and whatever the oldest person in the village remembered. Your teacher was grandpa. Your textbook was "because I said so." Truth was decided by whoever had the loudest voice and the fewest teeth. And communication? Glacial. A message from 50 miles away might take days to arrive. News from another country? Weeks or months if it made it at all. By the time you heard the king had died, his replacement might already be on his deathbed. So, imagine living every day believing the world could end at any moment, that invisible forces were out to get you, and that the only protection you had was superstition, ritual, and whatever your priest, or neighbor, told you to do. Welcome to the medieval mind. Afraid of the sky, loyal to your lord, and terrified of your own shadow. By now you've probably come to a very clear conclusion. You wouldn't have lasted a day in the Middle Ages. Not because you're weak, but because the past was relentless, disgusting, violent, and utterly unforgiving. We live in a world of antibiotics, running water, soap, and flush toilets, and yet we still find things to complain about. Ugh, the Wi-Fi is slow. In the Middle Ages, the closest thing to streaming was watching your neighbor die of dysentery. They got my coffee order wrong. Medieval people drank beer for breakfast because water could kill them. Your latte mistake doesn't seem so serious now, does it? My job is exhausting. You mean your 8-hour shift in a climate-controlled building with ergonomic chairs, coffee breaks, and health insurance? A medieval peasant burned 4,000 calories a day just staying alive. I wish I lived in a simpler time. Oh really? When people used leaves to wipe, bloodletting for headaches, and trial by fire to determine guilt. Simpler doesn't mean better. Sometimes it just means more lethal. We fantasize about castles and kings but forget the lice, the sewage, the rotting food, and the lack of rights. We idolize knights, but forget they were elite warlords stepping over starving peasants in rusty boots. We romanticize courtly love, but forget most people never lived long enough to have teeth in their wedding portraits. The truth is, every single convenience you take for granted today, from refrigerators to antibiotics to knowing the Earth orbits the Sun, is the result of centuries of brutal trial, error, and survival. And you? You were born at the very best moment in human history to be alive. So next time you flush a toilet, pop a Tylenol, or turn on the tap for clean drinking water, say a silent thank you to every soul who suffered, scraped, and screamed through the centuries to get us here. Because the past wasn't poetic. It was pain. And you're lucky enough to just read about it. So now that you've survived this guided tour through one of the filthiest, most violent, and downright terrifying chapters in human history, you officially know too much. Too much to ever watch a medieval movie the same way again. Too much to complain about modern life without thinking. Hey, at least no one's throwing poop out their window above me. If you learned something, laughed awkwardly, or gagged just a little, you're one of us now. So go ahead. Bell, hit that subscribe button. Thumbs up, smash the like, not like they smash chamber pots. Speech balloon, and drop a comment below. Which medieval horror would have ended you in under 24 hours? We've got more coming, dark history, brutal truths, and time travel nightmares that'll make your AC, shampoo, and Google search bar feel like miracles. Until then, stay clean, stay grateful, and for the love of modern plumbing, never wish you were born in the Middle Ages.